Olivia Thompson gazed at the New York City skyline through the mirrored windows of her penthouse in Upper East Side. At 45, heir to the real estate empire built by her late husband, Richard Thompson, she had everything money could buy. And that was precisely the problem. The predictability of her life suffocated her, like the crystal walls that surrounded her. The sun was setting on the horizon as she absently twirled the glass of red wine between her fingers, her perfectly manicured nails reflecting the orange light of twilight. Her reflection in the glass revealed an elegant woman with shoulder-length, brown hair and piercing green eyes that carried a glimmer of restlessness. "Ma'am, I found the information you requested," announced Mary, her personal assistant for over a decade, entering the office with a folder in hand. Olivia took the file with an anxiety she hadn't felt in a long time. On the first page, a photo of Ryan Sanders, 35, former international model, who had graced campaigns for the world's biggest fashion brands. Time had been kind to him. His striking features remained intact, though his gaze now conveyed a maturity that made him even more interesting. "Did he accept the dinner invitation?" Olivia asked without taking her eyes off the file. "Yes, ma'am. After mentioning the fee amount, he didn't hesitate. Apparently, he's been going through financial difficulties since his modeling agency went bankrupt last year." Olivia smiled, satisfied. "Perfect. Prepare everything for tomorrow night and Mary, absolute discretion, as always." After the assistant left, Olivia walked to her desk, an imposing piece of solid wood that had belonged to Richard. Her fingers slid over the polished surface until they reached a specific drawer, which she opened with a small golden key she always carried with her. Inside was a letter already yellowed by time, which she reread for the 1,000th time. Richard's words, hastily written days before his sudden departure, still made her heart clench. "My love, if anything happens to me, look in the library safe. There are secrets that need to be protected at all costs. Trust only yourself." Olivia put the letter away and returned to the window. After 5 years, she was finally ready to uncover the truth, but she needed help. Someone from outside, someone who wouldn't raise suspicions. And Ryan Sanders was perfect for the role. The next day, as she prepared for dinner, Olivia mentally reviewed every detail of her plan. She chose an elegant but discreet black dress and minimalist jewelry. She didn't want to intimidate her guest, at least not yet. The sound of the doorbell pulled her from her thoughts at exactly 8 p.m. Punctuality, first positive point. Through the security cameras, she observed Ryan arriving, wearing a well-tailored suit that, despite not being designer, flattered him. He seemed slightly nervous, running his hand through his dark hair before ringing the doorbell again. "You can let him in," Olivia instructed the security guard through the intercom, who promptly escorted Ryan to the private elevator. When the doors opened directly into the penthouse, Olivia was waiting with a calculated smile. Ryan was momentarily speechless, clearly impressed by both the environment and his hostess. "Mrs. Thompson, it's a pleasure to meet you in person," he finally said, extending his hand in greeting. "Please call me Olivia," she replied, indicating the way to the dining room. "I hope you like red wine." During dinner, served by a discreet and efficient team, Olivia observed Ryan's every move. He maintained good table manners, knowing how to use the cutlery correctly, remnants of his years in the international fashion world. His conversation was pleasant, although he avoided talking about his current situation. "I imagine you're curious about the reason for this dinner," Olivia commented when dessert was served. Ryan carefully set down his wine glass. "I confess I am. Your assistant wasn't very specific about the work you have in mind." Olivia leaned slightly forward, lowering her voice. "That's because what I have to propose isn't exactly conventional work, Mr. Sanders. In fact, I need your help to solve a mystery that has been tormenting me for years." The interest in Ryan's eyes intensified. "What kind of mystery?" "One that's worth much more than the initial fee you were offered," Olivia replied, rising from the table with feline grace. "Follow me to the library. There's something I need to show you." The private library of the Thompson penthouse was an imposing space, with floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound volumes. The aroma of old books mingled with Olivia's discreet perfume, creating a unique atmosphere that didn't go unnoticed by Ryan. "Impressive," he murmured, slowly turning to absorb every detail of the environment. His eyes were drawn to a large painting above the fireplace, a portrait of Olivia next to a middle-aged man, elegant and with a penetrating gaze. "Your husband?" he asked, although he already knew the answer. "Richard," Olivia confirmed, her voice softening as she pronounced the name. "This portrait was painted 6 years ago, shortly before his departure." She paused, studying Ryan's reaction. "What do you know about my husband, Mr. Sanders?" Ryan chose his words carefully. "Just what was published in the media. Richard Thompson, one of the country's biggest real estate tycoons, built an empire from scratch, revolutionized the market with sustainable projects, and departed suddenly, leaving behind a fortune and many unanswered questions," Olivia completed, walking to one of the bookshelves. Her fingers slid over the book's spines with familiarity. "You know what else he left, Mr. Sanders? Secrets. Many secrets." Ryan watched as she manipulated something on the shelf, and suddenly a soft click echoed through the library. Her section of the wall slid silently, revealing a small hidden room. "Please come in," Olivia gestured, an enigmatic smile on her lips. The secret room was smaller than a common office, but perfectly organized. An antique desk dominated the center, on it only an intricately carved wooden box. On the walls, maps and architectural plans from different eras overlapped. "Richard spent hours here in the last months of his life," Olivia explained, closing the door behind them. "I used to find him studying these documents in the middle of the night, muttering about connections and patterns. At the time, I attributed his behavior to business stress." She approached the desk, her heels echoing on the marble floor. "But on the morning he left, he gave me this." Olivia pulled from her dress neckline a delicate chain with a golden key and a letter with specific instructions. Ryan remained silent, hypnotized by the narrative and Olivia's magnetic presence. She continued. "The letter mentioned a safe and documents that could change everything. Documents that would compromise powerful people, businessmen and politicians involved in a scheme bigger than we could imagine." "And why didn't you open the safe all these years?" Ryan asked, finally, finding his voice. Olivia smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Because, Mr. Sanders, the safe isn't here. This room is just the beginning of the story. Richard was brilliant at creating puzzles, and this is his greatest enigma. Each document in this room contains a clue, and we need to decipher them to find the safe's real location." She moved closer to Ryan, close enough for him to smell her perfume. "And that's where you come in. I need someone with a different perspective, someone from outside the vicious circle of power I live in, someone who has no connections to the past." "Why me?" Ryan questioned, aware of the proximity between them. "There must be more qualified people." "Because you have nothing to lose," Olivia responded directly, "and much to gain. If you help me find and open this safe, in addition to the initial fee, I'll offer you a significant percentage of what's inside." Ryan studied Olivia's face, trying to decipher her true intentions. "And if I refuse, then we finish our dinner cordially, you receive the agreed fee, and we never see each other again," she replied simply. "But something tells me you won't refuse. I saw it in your eyes. During dinner, you're as tired of the same old routine as I am." Olivia walked to one of the maps on the wall, her fingers tracing an imaginary line. "Richard used to say that great fortunes are built on great secrets. I'm offering you the chance to uncover some of them. What do you say, Mr. Sanders? Are you ready for an adventure?" Ryan looked around the secret room, at the documents on the walls, at the mysterious box on the desk, and finally, at Olivia. At that moment, he realized that his monotonous life of the past few years had just gained a new and unexpected chapter. Ryan watched intently as Olivia used the golden key to open the wooden box on the desk. The interior, lined with red velvet, contained a meticulously organized collection of old documents, yellowed photographs, and a small leather-bound diary. "Where do we start?" he asked, feeling the adrenaline of discovery course through his body. Olivia carefully removed the diary. Richard was methodical in everything he did. This diary contains his notes from the last few months, but she opened the notebook, revealing pages filled with seemingly random symbols and numbers. It's all coded. Ryan took the diary, analyzing the notes. His international experience as a model had exposed him to different languages and codes, and something about the symbols seemed vaguely familiar. "This reminds me of the architectural projects I saw in Milan," he commented, more to himself than to Olivia. Her eyes sparkled with interest. "How so?" "When I did a campaign for an Italian brand, we photographed in a historic palace. The architect, responsible for the restoration, showed me old plans that used a similar system of symbols to hide important details from competing projects." Olivia quickly moved to one of the maps on the wall. "Richard spent a lot of time in Italy before starting his empire here. He always said that's where he learned his greatest business secrets." She pointed to specific markings on the map. "Look at these symbols here. They're similar to those in the diary." Ryan approached, his arm brushing lightly against Olivia's as they both examined the map. It was an old plan of downtown New York City with handwritten notes in the margins. "These numbers look like coordinates," he observed, "and this symbol repeats in 5 different locations. They're all properties that belong to the Thompson Empire," Olivia explained, her voice carrying a note of discovery. "But Richard sold all of them in the last few months before his departure, except one." Her fingers traced a line to a specific point on the map. "The Aurora building. Why did this one remain?" "Because officially it never existed," Olivia answered with an enigmatic smile. "In public records, that address is just an empty lot. But Richard built something there, in secret. More than 2 decades ago." Ryan frowned, intrigued. "How is it possible to hide an entire building?" "With the right connections and—" Olivia flipped through the diary until she found a specific page, a complex system of shell companies and false documents. Richard was a master at creating perfect facades. As they examined more documents, Ryan noticed a pattern in the old photographs. "These photos always show the same group of people with your husband. Who are they?" Olivia picked up one of the photographs, her face showing a mixture of recognition and concern. "The Circle," as Richard called them, businessmen and politicians who met regularly to, according to him, shape the future of the city. This one," she pointed to a tall man with graying hair, "is Alexander Vaughan, current chairman of the Federal Reserve, and this," her finger moved to an elegant woman with a severe expression, "is Margaret Alvarez, Secretary of Commerce." "Powerful people," Ryan commented, beginning to understand the dimension of the mystery he was getting involved in. "And these are just the public faces," Olivia added. "The real power was in the shadows. Richard discovered something about them, something big enough to—" She stopped abruptly, composing herself. "To change everything." Ryan realized there was more to the story than Olivia was revealing, but decided not to push. Instead, he focused on the clues they had. "The diary and the map seem to indicate that the safe is in this Aurora building. Why don't we just go there?" "Because it's not that simple," Olivia replied, pulling more documents from the box. "The building has ultra-modern security systems, and only a few specific people have access. Besides," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, "in recent months I've noticed strange movements. People following me, mysterious calls, hacked emails. The Circle knows I'm investigating, and they won't make our work easy." A heavy silence fell over the room as they both absorbed the gravity of the situation. Ryan looked again at Richard's portrait above the fireplace, now noticing a subtle tension in his smile, as if he carried the weight of enormous secrets. The next morning, Ryan returned to Olivia's penthouse equipped with a laptop and several notes he had made during the night. He had barely slept, his mind buzzing with the discoveries of the previous day and the possibilities that were opening up before him. Mary led him to a different office from the library, where Olivia was already working intently on her computer. She looked up when he entered, and a small smile appeared on her lips. "I see you couldn't sleep either," she commented, noticing the subtle dark circles under his eyes. "I spent the night researching 19th century Italian architectural codes," Ryan replied, placing his laptop on the desk. "And I found something interesting." Olivia stood up and walked over to him, the sound of her heels echoing on the marble floor. "Show me." Ryan opened several images on his computer. This code system was used by a secret society of architects in Florence. They hid information about secret chambers and underground passages in their plans through symbols that looked like mere decorations to untrained eyes. Richard spent a year in Florence before returning to the States and starting his company, Olivia murmured, leaning over Ryan's shoulder to get a better look at the images. He always said that year changed his life. Olivia's subtle perfume invaded Ryan's senses, making it difficult to maintain concentration. The symbols in his diary are almost identical, he continued, opening another page. If we apply the same decoding system, we can discover what he was trying to protect, Olivia completed, her eyes shining with excitement. She abruptly moved away, walking to a metal file cabinet in the corner of the room. I need to show you something. Olivia typed a combination into the cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. These are all the original plans for Richard's projects, including... She hesitated for a moment. Including some that were never officially registered. As they spread the documents over the large office desk, Ryan noticed that Olivia occasionally cast worried glances at the window. Are you expecting someone? Just being cautious, she replied vaguely. The circle has eyes everywhere. They worked together for hours, comparing symbols, translating codes, and assembling an increasingly intriguing puzzle. The forced proximity created moments of electric tension between them, which both tried to ignore in favor of the mission. Here, Ryan suddenly exclaimed, pointing to a specific sequence in the diary. This part talks about a system of underground tunnels connecting 5 different points in the city. And look at this date. It coincides exactly with the period when Richard sold the other properties. Olivia examined the discovery carefully. The tunnels must have been the real reason he kept the Aurora building. It's not just a building, it's an access point to a secret network under the city. But why would someone build something like that? Power, Olivia answered simply. Control. Imagine having unrestricted access to strategic points in the city without anyone knowing. The Circle didn't just build buildings, they created a parallel system of influence. Ryan leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. And now they fear you having access to this information. It's not just the information they fear, Olivia said, her voice carrying a weight that Ryan hadn't heard before. It's what I intend to do with it. At that moment, Mary rushed into the office. Mom, Alexander Vaughan is in the lobby. He says he needs to speak with you urgently. Olivia exchanged a significant look with Ryan. The chairman of the Federal Reserve doesn't make social calls, she murmured, quickly beginning to gather the documents. Quick, help me put all of this away. As they hurriedly organized the evidence of their investigation, Ryan noticed that Olivia's hands were trembling slightly. She might be a powerful and determined woman, but it was clear that the Circle affected her more deeply than she admitted. Go down the service stairs, Olivia instructed, handing him a folder with some documents. Keep working on the codes at home. We'll talk later. Before Ryan could respond, she was already heading to the main elevator, her posture completely transforming. The investigative Olivia gave way to the elegant widow of magnate Richard Thompson, ready for another veiled confrontation with one of the most powerful men in the country. Night had already fallen when Olivia finally managed to call Ryan. Her hands were still tense after the conversation with Alexander Vaughan, an encounter that had seemed more like a veiled interrogation. We need to meet, she said as soon as he answered, but not here. Do you know the Antica Cafe in Greenwich Village? An hour later they met at the nearly empty cafe, a discreet establishment with low lighting and tables set far apart from each other. Olivia chose a table in the back, away from the windows. She was dressed more casually than usual, wearing dark sunglasses even at night, an obvious attempt not to be recognized. Vaughan's visit wasn't a coincidence, she began after the waiter had walked away with their orders. He made a point of mentioning each of Richard's former properties, especially the Aurora building. They know we're investigating. Ryan leaned forward, lowering his voice. I found more information about the codes. They're not just architectural plans, there are financial records hidden in them. Account numbers, international transfers. Transfers to where? Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Luxembourg? Ryan discreetly consulted his notes. But the most interesting thing is the pattern. All the transfers happened 3 days before major Federal Reserve decisions that affected the real estate market. Olivia removed her sunglasses, her green eyes shining with a mixture of triumph and concern. Richard discovered how they operated. The Circle didn't just control the market, they actively manipulated it. But why would your husband participate in this? A sad smile appeared on Olivia's lips. Richard wasn't like them, at least not in the beginning. He entered the Circle thinking it was just a group of influential businessmen. When he discovered the truth, she paused, taking a sip of her coffee. He started gathering evidence, documenting everything. That's when he built the tunnels to transport documents, to create escape routes, Olivia corrected. Richard knew that eventually the Circle would discover what he was doing. The tunnels were his contingency plan. Ryan processed the information in silence. After a few moments, he commented, "You still haven't told me everything, have you?" Olivia studied him for a long time before answering, "No, I haven't. There are things I need to confirm first. But I can say that Richard wasn't the only member of the Circle dissatisfied with their methods. There were others, people who wanted to expose the truth." "And what happened to them?" "They were silenced," Olivia answered simply. "In various ways. Some lost everything in unsuccessful financial operations. Others were involved in fabricated scandals. The Circle is expert at destroying reputations." A waiter approached to collect the empty cups, causing both to fall silent momentarily. When they were alone again, Ryan asked, "Why now, Olivia? Why wait 5 years to investigate all this?" She took a while to respond, her fingers absently playing with a napkin. "Because only now do I have all the necessary pieces. Richard planned everything meticulously. The clues, the codes, the documents, each thing was supposed to be discovered at a specific time." "What do you mean?" "The diary we found. It wasn't in the box until 3 months ago. It mysteriously appeared in my office, along with a red rose, exactly as Richard used to do when he wanted to surprise me." Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying that someone is controlling when and how you discover things?" "Not someone," Olivia corrected. "Richard. Before he left, he programmed a series of automatic deliveries, all timed. It was his way of protecting me, ensuring that I would only discover the truth when I was prepared and had the right connections." At that moment, Olivia's cell phone vibrated. She looked at the screen and her face paled slightly. "What is it?" Ryan asked, concerned. "A message from an unknown number," she replied, showing him the screen. The message contained only 2 words, "Tempus revelet, time reveals" in Latin. "It was Richard's favorite motto," Olivia explained, her voice trembling slightly. "And today marks exactly 5 years since he left." Ryan observed as she put away her cell phone, noticing how her hands trembled slightly. There was more to this story than simple corporate corruption. The Circle's secrets seemed increasingly dark, and Olivia, the powerful and controlled Olivia, clearly feared something very specific that she had not yet revealed. The next morning, Ryan was surprised by a message from Mary asking him to meet Olivia at Central Park. The specific meeting place was the Bethesda Terrace, a relatively quiet space even on weekends. He found her sitting on a bench, observing the iconic fountain. She was wearing workout clothes and sneakers, as if she was on her morning run, a perfect disguise to not draw attention. "I received another gift today," she said as soon as he sat down without taking her eyes off the fountain. From her sports bag, she pulled out a flash drive. It was on my breakfast table, along with another red rose. "What's on it?" "I don't know yet. Richard always liked elaborate games. Each file is protected by a different password, and the clues to decipher them are scattered in places that only I would know." She finally looked at Ryan. "That's why we need to go to the place where it all began." "The Aurora building?" Olivia shook her head. "No, the beach house where I met Richard. That's where he first told me about the Circle 15 years ago." 2 hours later, they were driving on the Long Island Expressway towards the Hamptons. Olivia was at the wheel of an ordinary car, very different from the luxury vehicles she usually used, another precaution to avoid being noticed. I was an investigative journalist when I met Richard, Olivia began to tell, breaking the silence of the trip. I was investigating a series of suspicious acquisitions in the real estate market. All the clues pointed to a specific group of businessmen. The Circle, Ryan deduced. Exactly. But before I could publish anything, Richard sought me out. He invited me for a weekend at this beach house, saying he would tell me the whole truth. She smiled at the memory. I thought it would be another bribery attempt, like so many I had already received. But it was different. How so? Richard showed me documents, proof of how the Circle operated. But he also showed me something more important, how they could be stopped. He had a plan, a way to expose everything without being silenced, like the others who had tried. Ryan noticed that Olivia's knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel so tightly. And why didn't you follow through with the plan? Because we fell in love, she answered simply. And Richard decided that keeping me safe was more important than exposing the truth. I abandoned the story. We got married, and for 10 years we lived an apparently perfect life. I convinced myself that I could ignore what I knew. They arrived at a secondary road, less busy. Olivia continued. But Richard never really abandoned the plan. He continued collecting evidence, secretly building his case. The difference is that this time he prepared for all possibilities. The beach house appeared ahead of them, a modern and elegant construction, but discreet by the standards Ryan would have expected. Olivia parked and for a moment just observed the property. I haven't been here since Richard left, she murmured. But yesterday, when I received that message in Latin, I knew it was time to come back. Inside the house, everything was impeccably preserved, as if waiting for their return. Olivia walked directly to the office on the second floor. On the wall behind the desk, there was an abstract painting, by the same artist as the sculpture she had been observing in the park earlier. Richard had a theory, she said, removing the painting from the wall and revealing a small safe. He used to say that true art is in the spaces between forms, in the voids that give meaning to the whole. Her fingers moved over the safe's keypad, typing in a combination. Just as true secrets are in the spaces between obvious lies. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside was only an old book, a first edition of The Count of Monte Cristo. Richard's favorite book, Olivia explained, carefully leafing through it. The story of a man who spent years planning his revenge against those who betrayed him. He used to joke that Dumas had stolen his story. Between the pages of the book, she found an envelope. Inside it, a single sheet of paper with GPS coordinates, and a phrase, "The safe was never in Aurora. It's where everything really began." Ryan watched as Olivia typed the coordinates into her cell phone. Her eyes widened as she saw the result. "It's the address of Richard's first development," she whispered. "The building that got him noticed by the Circle. But that building was imploded years ago, unless the implosion was another illusion," Ryan completed, "like the Aurora building." Olivia carefully put the paper away. Richard always said that the best lies are those that everyone wants to believe. The Circle believed they had destroyed all the evidence along with that building. A determined smile appeared on her lips. But they didn't know Richard like I did. The sun was already setting when Olivia and Ryan arrived at the location indicated by the coordinates, an apparently empty lot in downtown Manhattan surrounded by worn construction barriers announcing a future development that never materialized. "Amazing how no one questions an empty lot in the middle of the city for so long," Olivia commented, parking the car a few blocks away. "People see what they want to see." They waited for complete nightfall before approaching the site. Olivia had changed from her workout clothes into something more practical, dark pants and a light jacket. Ryan carried a backpack with basic equipment, flashlights, gloves, and the flash drive found that morning. "How are we going to get in?" Ryan asked, observing the fenced lot. Olivia smiled, walking to a closed newsstand on the corner. With surprising skill, she manipulated something behind the metal structure. A soft click was heard, and a small door opened in the ground, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. "Richard always liked secret passages," she explained, beginning to descend. "He used to say that the best way to hide something is to leave it in plain sight." The tunnel was surprisingly clean and well maintained, with emergency lighting that activated as they advanced. After a few minutes of walking, they reached a massive steel door with an electronic panel. "This is where the flash drive comes in," Olivia said, connecting it to the panel. Each file must contain a part of the access code. While she worked on the files, Ryan examined the tunnel walls. These markings, they're the same as in Richard's diary. "He used the same system in all his secret projects," Olivia confirmed, her fingers moving quickly over the tablet she had brought. "It's like a hidden signature. Each symbol tells a story to those who know how to read it." Suddenly, the tunnel lights flickered. Olivia froze, her fingers stopping over the tablet. This shouldn't be happening. A distant sound of mechanical doors closing echoed through the tunnel. Ryan checked his cell phone. "No signal down here." "Someone knows we're here," Olivia murmured, her fingers now moving with renewed urgency over the tablet. "We need to hurry." The air in the tunnel began to feel heavier, a subtle but growing pressure in their ears. "They're altering the air pressure," Olivia explained, her voice tense. "It's one of the security systems. We have a few minutes before the tunnel is completely sealed." "How did they find out?" "The Circle must have monitored the beach house," she replied, still focused on the tablet. "It was careless of me not to consider that. Richard would have foreseen—" She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening. "Of course. Richard did foresee it. That's why the flash drive appeared today. He knew I would come here." Her fingers flew over the keyboard with new purpose. "We're not looking for a password. We're looking for a specific sequence of errors." "What do you mean?" "Richard always said that failure is the best teacher. The files don't contain the correct code. They contain all the codes that don't work. And by trying each one of them," a new click was heard, this time coming from inside the steel door. It began to open slowly. "The system registers the pattern of wrong attempts as the correct password," Olivia completed, a triumphant smile on her lips. They quickly crossed the door, closing it behind them just in time to hear the tunnel being sealed on the other side. They found themselves in a large circular room, its walls covered by powered-off computer screens. "The control center," Olivia whispered, walking to a central console. From here, Richard monitored all of the Circle's operations, every transaction, every meeting, every decision. She turned on the main system, and the screens around them came to life. Financial data, emails, security recordings, an impressive amount of information began to flow before their eyes. "My God," Ryan murmured, observing the numbers that appeared. "This goes beyond simple market manipulation. They practically control the entire country's economy." "Not just the economy," Olivia corrected, her eyes fixed on a specific screen. "Look at this, bills, judicial decisions, even election results, everything planned years in advance." As they examined the files, Ryan noticed something strange. "Olivia, all this information, it's current, it keeps being updated." Olivia nodded slowly. "Because the system never stopped functioning. Richard built something much bigger than a simple archive of evidence. He created a complete observatory of power. And now—" She turned to Ryan, her eyes shining with determination. "Now we can use this against them." A soft beeping sound began to emanate from one of the monitors. Olivia approached to check. Her expression changed subtly as she read the message that appeared on the screen. "What is it?" Ryan asked, noticing her tension. "A message from Richard," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Programmed to appear exactly at this moment. He knew I would be here today." Olivia remained motionless in front of the monitor, her hands slightly trembling as Richard's message began to reveal itself. "My dear Olivia, if you're reading this, it means the moment I've planned for so long has finally arrived. You've always been stronger and smarter than I deserved, and I know you've discovered all the signs I left along the way. I need to confess something. The Circle isn't exactly what you think. When I started investigating them, I discovered something much bigger. They're not just a group of corrupt businessmen. They're guardians of a system that has maintained the balance of power for generations. Every building I constructed, every project I developed, was part of a larger plan. The Aurora building, the tunnels, this control center, they weren't just to collect evidence against them. They were pieces of a much more complex game. The Circle believes they control everything through money and influence. But I created something they never imagined possible, an autonomous system that records, analyzes, and preserves their every move. Every decision they make, every order they give, every cent they move, it all gets recorded here, impossible to be erased or altered. But the true power of this system isn't in the information it stores, but in what it can do with it. For the past 5 years, while they thought they had silenced me, the system continued to function, collecting data, establishing connections. Now it's ready to be used. Olivia, you always wanted justice. I wanted to give you something bigger, the chance to rewrite the rules of the game. Ryan, who was reading over Olivia's shoulder, murmured, "What is he talking about?" Olivia raised her hand, asking for silence as she continued reading. "The flash drive you received doesn't just contain access codes. It carries a special program, designed to be activated only when all the correct protocols were followed, exactly as you did today. This control center isn't just an observatory, it's a command central. From here, you can do more than expose the Circle's secrets. You can take control of the entire system they built. But I need you to understand something. Using this power means accepting an immense responsibility. The Circle, with all its flaws, maintained a certain order in the chaos. Bringing them down without a plan would cause a collapse that would affect millions of innocent people. That's why I waited 5 years. I needed to be sure that you would be prepared not just to discover the truth, but to decide what to do with it." Olivia paused in her reading, her hands now firmly supported on the console. Ryan noticed that her eyes were shining with contained tears. "There's more," she said, her voice hoarse. She continued reading. "You're not alone in this mission. There are others who work in the shadows, people who also want change, but understand the need for balance. They will reveal themselves when the time is right. The young man who is with you now, yes, I knew you would find someone like him, is more important than you imagine. His presence is not a coincidence. Observe him carefully. Olivia, my love, you have always been the most integral person I've known. Your quest for justice and truth was what made me believe we could change things. Now I place in your hands the power to make that change. Use it wisely. With eternal love, Richard P.S. Check the Phoenix Project file. You'll understand everything." Olivia slowly moved away from the monitor, as if the weight of Richard's words had physically hit her. She turned to Ryan, studying him with a new look. "What did he mean about you?" she asked. "How could he know?" Ryan seemed as surprised as she was. "I have no idea. I never met your husband." Olivia turned back to the console, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Phoenix Project file, here it is." When the file opened, both remained silent for long moments. On the screen, a series of photographs and documents began to appear. Among them, an old photo that made Olivia's blood run cold. Ryan, much younger, next to someone she knew very well. "This is impossible," Ryan whispered, his voice trembling. "This photo, I was 16 years old. The man next to me was my father," Olivia completed, her voice barely above a whisper. Olivia sat heavily in one of the control center chairs, her eyes alternating between the photo on the screen and Ryan's face. The resemblance between the teenager in the photograph and the man in front of her was undeniable, but there was something more, a connection she couldn't believe she had missed. "My father was a professor of architecture at Columbia," she began, her voice laden with emotion. "He coordinated a special program for young talents. The Phoenix Project," Ryan completed, his eyes fixed on the screen. "A mentoring program for teenagers from underprivileged communities who showed aptitude for architecture and design. I was one of the selected ones." "Why did you never mention this?" Ryan ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture that Olivia had noticed before. "Because the program ended abruptly after 6 months. Your father, he just disappeared. Everyone said he had accepted a position abroad, but you didn't believe that," Olivia completed. "Neither did I. My father would never abandon his students without an explanation." She returned to the console, opening more files from the Phoenix Project. Documents, reports, and more photographs filled the screens around them. Richard knew about all of this. He investigated every detail. The program wasn't just about architecture, was it? Ryan asked, beginning to understand. Olivia shook her head. Apparently not. Look at this. She pointed to a specific document. The Phoenix Project was a front. My father was identifying and training young people who could one day oppose the Circle. Brilliant people from humble origins who couldn't be bought or corrupted. And the Circle found out? Yes, but not in the way we imagined. Olivia opened another file, revealing a series of financial reports. My father didn't disappear because he was threatened. He withdrew to protect the students. You, Ryan, you were considered the most promising of all. Ryan approached the screens, absorbing the information with a mixture of fascination and horror. So my career as a model, the bankruptcy of my agency, none of that was accidental? The Circle monitored all the former students of the Phoenix Project, Olivia explained, her voice trembling. They made sure none of you reached positions of real power. In your case, and she hesitated, in your case, they created opportunities in the fashion world to keep you away from architecture. A heavy silence fell over the room as they both processed the implications of these revelations. It was Ryan who finally broke it. Richard knew all of this when he planned this moment. Olivia nodded slowly. He not only knew, he planned our partnership. The debts that led your agency to bankruptcy, the invitation to dinner, everything was orchestrated to bring us together here. Why? Because together we represent something the Circle fears most. Olivia stood up, walking to Ryan. You have the technical knowledge and vision that my father saw in you years ago. I have the resources and influence necessary to make change happen. Separately, we are isolated pieces. Together, we can really change the game, Ryan completed, beginning to understand the magnitude of Richard's plan. Olivia returned to the central console, inserting the flash drive into a specific port. Richard didn't just want to expose the Circle. He wanted to create an alternative, a new system, fairer and more transparent. New screens lit up around them, showing complex architectural projects, not just buildings, but entire cities planned with a greater purpose. These are your projects, Olivia said to Ryan. The ones you should have created if you hadn't been diverted from your path. Richard kept them all these years, developed them, improved them. Ryan examined the projects with teary eyes. They were mature and sophisticated, versions of the sketches he had made as a teenager, dreams of transforming communities through conscious architecture. It's not too late, Olivia continued, her voice now firm and determined. Richard gave us the tools. We have control of the system, access to information, resources, and the Circle. They won't just allow us to... We don't need their permission, Olivia interrupted, a determined smile on her lips. In fact, they don't have as much power as they think anymore. Over the last 5 years, while they thought they controlled everything, Richard's system has been quietly redirecting resources, establishing alternative connections, preparing the ground for a transition. She extended her hand to Ryan. The only question is, are you ready to resume the path you were forced to abandon? Ryan looked at Olivia's outstretched hand, then at the projects on the screens. His youthful dreams transformed into real possibilities. His whole life made more sense at that moment. The interrupted program, the improvised career, the financial difficulties, the meeting with Olivia. Your father saw something in me 20 years ago, he finally said. Richard trusted that vision. I think it's time to find out if they were right. 3 months passed since the night of revelations in the control center. Olivia's office on the top floor of Thompson Tower was different. The walls once occupied by expensive artwork now displayed architectural plans and models of innovative projects. On one of the desks, the day's newspaper bore the headline, Thompson Group announces largest urban revitalization project in country's history. Olivia observed the city through the panoramic windows, but her gaze was different. No longer that of a bored, rich widow, but of a woman with purpose. The sound of the door opening made her smile before she even turned around. The meeting with the investors was a success, Ryan announced, entering the room with a folder of documents. His well-cut suit and confident posture revealed a transformation. That went beyond appearance. They could hardly believe it when I presented the sustainable housing projects. Richard was right, Olivia replied, walking to her desk. The system he created wasn't just to watch the circle. It was to prove that there's a better way of doing business. In the past few months, they had used the power of the system strategically. Instead of abruptly exposing the circle's secrets, they opted for a more subtle and effective approach. They began implementing projects that the circle always considered impossible or unprofitable. The first housing complex will be inaugurated next month, Ryan commented, spreading plans on the desk. Exactly where one of the circle's old properties used to be. It's almost poetic, Olivia smiled, picking up one of the documents. And the Phoenix Project 2.0? Registrations have already surpassed 1,000 candidates, Ryan replied with evident pride. This time no one will be able to interrupt the program. The foundation is bulletproof and the students will have all the necessary support to develop their potential. A soft beep sounded from Olivia's computer. She checked the screen and her smile widened. Alexander Vaughan has just resigned from the chairmanship of the Federal Reserve. Apparently, he decided to retire to spend more time with family. After those documents about his connections to tax havens leaked, it's no surprise, Ryan commented. It's impressive how the circle is falling apart without a single direct confrontation. Because we're using their own weapons against them, Olivia explained, sitting in her chair. Influence, information, economic power, but with a different purpose. She opened a drawer and pulled out a yellowed envelope. Richard's last letter. You know what impresses me the most? How Richard predicted all of this. He didn't want revenge or destruction. He wanted transformation. Ryan approached, leaning on the desk beside her. He also predicted that we would need each other. You have the influence and knowledge of the system. I have the technical vision and connection to the reality of the people we want to help. And together we have something the circle never had, Olivia completed, standing up to face Ryan. Real purpose. At that moment, Mary rushed into the office. Mrs. Thompson, the journalists are waiting in the conference room for the announcement. Olivia nodded, adjusting her blazer. Are you ready for this? She asked Ryan. After we announce the complete revitalization project, there's no turning back. I've never been more ready, he replied with conviction. It's time to show the world that there's a different way to build the future. As they walked together to the conference room, Olivia reflected on how her life had changed. The monotony that once suffocated her had given way to a sense of greater purpose than she had ever imagined possible. Richard's legacy wasn't just a control system or compromising information. It was an opportunity for true change. In the conference room, dozens of journalists waited anxiously. The cameras began to flash as soon as Olivia and Ryan took their places at the table. On the big screen behind them, images of the new projects alternated. Not just buildings, but entire communities planned to thrive. Good morning, everyone, Olivia began, her voice firm and clear. We're not here today just to announce a real estate project. We're here to present a new vision of the future. She paused, exchanging a knowing look with Ryan before continuing. The Thompson Group has always been known for building imposing structures, but from today on, our focus will be on building something much bigger, possibilities. As Olivia conducted the presentation, Ryan observed the extraordinary woman beside him and thought about all the twists and turns that had brought them here. Fate, or rather, Richard's meticulous planning, had not only united them, but created a partnership capable of achieving changes that once seemed impossible. The empire that the Circle took decades to build was being transformed not through confrontation or exposure, but by the practical demonstration that there is a better path. And as Olivia detailed the projects to the press, a new era began. Not just for them, but for all those whom the original Phoenix project had dreamed of helping. In the pocket of his suit jacket, Ryan carried a small piece of paper, one of the sketches he had made at 16 in Professor Thompson's program. It was a constant reminder that some dreams don't die. They just wait for the right moment to be reborn from the ashes, like a phoenix.